All right. I believe we're live. Let's check this out. Play. All right. Yep, we are live. I guess it starts with a commercial on the actual live stream. What's up, SE Nation? I got a surprise guest by the name of the great Phil Capiral.
What's up, everyone?
So Phil is a friend, a former client, current client. I don't know. Are you a current client?
I think both.
All right. A friend, more importantly. And we've talked so many times about processes and, hey, Mr. Mosey. So we've talked so many times about processes and stuff, and I figured you'd be a great guest to actually have this discussion.
Awesome.
So I actually started talking about like the back end and the front end, kind of like web development. What are your thoughts about the back end of sales engineering being like the customer non-facing stuff, and I
Yeah,
guess the front end is the customer facing stuff? Does that sound like a good, I guess?
yeah.
What's
I think we can start there. Honestly, I think that's where the juicy part of the SC work really begins, because you're sometimes researching some maybe complex questions and follow-ups and strategizing with the AE on the best way to kind of come back to the customer. I find that often kind of the funner part.
So I'm going to share my screen now for a second, and you'll see like when I started talking about it, I have 7 processes,
Mm-hmm.
and we're still at like the qualification, like before we jump into discovery. Like,
Gotcha.
you've been at like, smaller organizations. What
Mhm.
has your role been with the marketing part? Has there been anything with the marketing?
Yeah, definitely. I think, especially at the smaller companies, the marketing really relies and leans on SCs quite a bit, because they oftentimes are looking to the SC as kind of vetting the voice of their content, making sure it's accurate, and really they're kind of looking, at least in my experience, to SC to kind of drive a lot of the content there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so I think I mentioned in that video or in the last week's episode, and I'm actually doing a video about that next week on
Cool.
Sunday coming out, where
Nice.
I think of sales engineering as marketing at a smaller scale.
Hmm.
Because we know the customer story, but and when we share stories, we're sharing directly with the customers. And what marketing does is just take those, in theory, they should take those stories and broadcast them.
Yeah.
So that's where sales engineers, I think, do great when it comes to marketing. But yeah, okay. And so I talked about marketing, qualification, what was the role of the SE, opportunity assignment, whether it's pooled model
Hmm.
tied to salespeople, how is the opportunity assigned? Number 4 is like, when is the SE involved in the deal? All these things I find a lot of, at least at a minimum, a lot of startups never think about. Right?
Yeah. It's
So
especially with my experience at smaller companies, it's no one's really thinking about it until you introduce an SC, and then the SC is like, "Hey, we should probably do it this way." Like,
yeah, I've noticed that with a lot of companies that I've talked with and I've worked with. So it'll be good to actually start early on that before. I think when they hire a salesperson, they should hire an SE right away, personally,
mhm.
so that they can build the process. But that's a different story. So yeah,
That's funny, because I also agree with that, but I think the experience I found is SCs always, they come later. Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's
I found
interesting.
that, which kind of sucks because now when you're hired later as an SE, you're trying to shove yourself into the sales process,
Exactly. Yeah, that's
and
spot on.
you're not the only one. Like I've talked to other SEs. I had a client who was also like the first SE at a company, and I'm going to talk about her like later. But we talked earlier about like, hey, when does the SE get involved? I mentioned I like to get involved in the discovery process, maybe even the qualification in terms of like sharing questions with my account manager and SDR. But she was getting involved either at the POC or at the implementation phase. So like basically, you're not hiring an SE, you're hiring an
Yeah.
implementation engineer. So
Right.
yeah. And then, do you do RFPs?
Yeah, they come across a few times. I think it's probably a resounding agreement that everyone hates RFPs.
Yeah.
uh, I've had,
Do you have a
they're
process
but
for
they're
them?
very satisfying when you win one. But it's
When you win one, how often
yeah,
do you
when you
win
win
one?
one. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have a process for RFPs?
It's interesting. In my consulting days, yes, because I ran into them quite a bit. But as an SC, not so much because they don't come as often. So it's just kind of winging it or kind of adapting to what we think the client's going to want. But typically, I approach them. Uh, like sometimes they'll send you an RFP and they'll try to be very prescriptive of tell me this, this, and this. But
Yeah.
usually, I like to just kind of throw that all away and be like, hey, let's kind of dig deep. I'm going to tell you what I think you need, and then kind of just show them that we're trying to think in their best interests.
So the majority of my deals do not come from RFPs.
Ah,
And when I do get RFPs, my process is to say no to responding to it unless I can
ah,
talk to
gotcha.
the people. If it's coming from procurement, like I so I work with SEs who do this, and I tell them the least amount of time.
Yeah, yeah,
Just do like let's just say that we put an effort in, but I'm not expecting to win this because usually when we get an RFP, especially if like it comes in on Friday morning and they say, "Hey, we want it by Friday evening," or you're usually the last option they're looking at. They have like
right.
other options, and you're just there to fulfill their process of requesting
It's
three
super
RFPs from three
frustrating.
vendors.
Like sometimes you can tell that maybe the RFP is already won by someone else, and they're
Yeah,
just going through the motions.
yeah. Well, and you can tell like, hey, this RFP was written by the competitor.
Right,
They're using the competitor terminology.
for sure, for
So
sure.
okay, and then we have like research and education. Actually, let me ask you this.
I like those two faces. Those are my favorite
Yeah. Well, why do you like them?
because that's where a lot of the solutioning happens. I think for me, like researching, in a customer call, you might get hit with a use case that you're not familiar with the platform can handle, and so that's where you kind of dig in, talk with engineers, talk with implementation, and just kind of come up with a story that will make sense.
Yeah. So I just modify it to say pre-meeting research. This is
Ah,
before you
okay,
even.
gotcha.
So I'm going like in the sales cycle. We're
I'm
still
jumping
not even
ahead.
at discovery. This is before you
Yeah,
even meet them for discovery. What does the
gotcha,
research
gotcha.
process looks like?
Yeah,
By the way, I see Tony here. I see Scott, and Scott and Tony connected, which is amazing. I'm glad you guys are
nice.
using this platform to connect on LinkedIn. That's great. If there's anybody else on here you want to introduce yourself, please do so. We have a great community. I know it's just three, but it is 8:23 at night. So I appreciate everybody who's here. And Phil is sacrificing his dinner time to be here because he's West Coast. All right, so like today, I'm kind of focusing on the back end as well. I wanted to finish the back end before we jump into the front end stuff.
Cool.
And I should learn not to drink Buble on the call, but I still do it. All right, so we got the lead. We talked about marketing. We talked about the research and assignment. Let's say an SE gets involved in the discovery process. That's a process on its own for the front end stuff. Uh, I appreciate that, Scott. Uh, so all these parts, like discovery, demo, and proof of concept, I'm going to consider them as front end. So I'm going to skip them for now.
Okay.
Yeah. We're going to go straight from proof of concept to proposal
Mhm.
because I find there's a big part here that people don't talk about, and you and I have had discussions about. Do you want to guess what it is?
No, go ahead.
8. Scoping.
Ah, yeah.
Actually, where does the scoping come as part of your process?
Um, Typically it'll come kind of in the middle, or maybe during a proof of concept, or in the middle of discovery and demo, because all the way through I'm kind of collecting all these notes, and then when I get to proposal, like what I like to do is kind of give the sales team like, hey, here's a bunch of criteria that I think is going to be important for the implementation team. And then also at that point, that's kind of used in as part of scoping for pricing, maybe too. So
Yeah. So that's why I put it like as part of the proposal before the proposal. Like every
yeah,
time we meet a customer, we're trying to figure out like what do they actually need.
hmm
But for me, in my opinion, the scoping process should not be done by sales engineers. If it's a complicated,
I agree.
if we're talking about implementation, if we're talking about bill of material, like you need 5 routers or whatever, sure, okay, sales engineers can do it. But here I'm talking maybe a little bit more. There's a couple different scoping that we're talking about. One, let's do this. One, it's the like bill of material, BOM, and then two is the implementations. The bill
Bill
of
of
material
material, is that like kind of like platform fee, kind of the commodity stuff?
in the hardware world, a bill of material is the actual equipment they're going to receive, like SKUs. Think of it
Ah,
as
gotcha, gotcha.
like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you're going to need this feature, and this feature.
gotcha.
Right?
Yeah, so I consider that like software licenses probably.
Yeah, it could be software licenses. It could be like anything that doesn't like anything you can take off the shelf,
Yep,
basically. But the implementation is then professional services.
yep, yep.
Who's they're going to do the work, and for like the bill of material, who's going to do it? It's SEs
Yeah, that makes sense.
almost always. They may ask for help from PLM, from specialist SEs, from anywhere in between, but it's usually done by SEs. Implementations should be done by the implementation team.
Should be. But
Yeah, and that's
it's
the problem.
funny why I've seen this multiple times where a lot of implementation groups aren't built to be customer facing or kind of be that have that sales muscle to think
Yeah,
about estimates, which is weird. Like, and so that's why I've always been around SEs that typically will do the estimate and SAL creation for the implementation team.
yeah. I mean, the way I see it, when you're doing implementations, your job is to work with the customer.
Yeah,
Is that
100%.
is that
Yeah,
accurate? So if you whenever you're working, I think anyone who works with another human being, they're part of their job is sales,
100%.
right? But now when you're working with customer, it's formally sales.
Yeah,
Right? Support, you can be part of sales because
right.
you're selling
Upsell,
your solution. Like if the customer has an issue and you came up with a workaround, you have to sell that workaround to the customer.
100%. Yeah,
So when we're talking about implementation, the implementation is a customer facing team. They better be talking, they better be selling. And again, I'm not trying to sell, like, I'm not saying selling as in trying to get more money out of the customer, but selling the methodology, selling
right.
the way we implement things. Because customers have their own thoughts about how things should be done, but they're not the experts. Greetings, Sid. Good to have you here.
Well, not only that too. I mean, the implementation team knows their team better than the SE. So like, if I say a feature is going to take 2 weeks, and like that's it's going to be more accurate if someone from the implementation team
Yeah.
estimates it.
So, like the same way the SE can lean on the specialist team or the product management team, the implementations team can lean on the SE. I
Yeah,
mean, generally speaking, the implementations team is doing the discovery process with the SE,
yeah.
so that they can actually offer a proposal.
I think what's key there, though, if it is working right, and you do have an implementations team that is doing that, I think what's key for the SC there is like doing a good handoff, getting them the right context, the right information, so that they,
Well, yeah, and so that brings me to kind of the how.
yeah, yeah,
SEs need to document,
yep, I agree.
but again, and that's an entire process. Like, how do SEs document? And how do they transfer the information? What are the information that the implementations teams need? So now the implementations team needs to kind of lead this and say, this is the information that I need from the
Yeah,
SE. This is the process. I need to like jump on a call with the customer, make sure we're all on the same page. Or maybe while we're doing the POV during the debrief session, the implementations team can jump on the call, like at least one.
Yeah.
And with all of this, there isn't one size fits all for all companies, right? Each company will have to create its own process, but these are things they have to think about.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. What am I thinking now? Am I thinking? So, what do you think the role of the SE is in the proposal, or
So
building the scope, or like the bill of material,
in the bill of material, I think,
other than doing that?
yeah, I think it's more just making sure that whatever they need, like, if you have for example, like a really large platform that might have tons of products and features, like they're not going to need all of it. So, like, I think the SE is the one that is kind of putting together the menu, right? That this customer is going to be successful. So,
So that isn't that the bill of material though?
oh yeah, yes. Oh, sorry, I thought you were asking about bill of material.
Oh no, I was talking about the proposal specifically.
Proposal, yes. So typically, I see the AE or sales rep driving most of that, and then typically an SC is kind of helping contribute to maybe sections or just rehashing what's also already been identified by the SC.
Yeah, I'm also reading what Sid says. One of the biggest downfalls of pre-sale, the CRM is always 100%. You might want to check out Acquire. I'm going to put a link here. Full disclosure, I am an advisor, but it's kind of we're calling it a business intelligence platform, but the goal is for it to help the SEs. I
That
should do a demo of that.
that's a really good comment by Sid,
Yeah.
because I find that during the scoping process, I do create a lot of awesome technical assets, pre-sales assets, and oftentimes, yeah, you're right. It'll just get swept under the rug as attachments, and like they don't like if you don't have a strong AE, they might not know the value of what that can bring.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So Sid is already familiar. I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but the reason I like it is because it puts the SE like forward
Yeah,
in terms
instead of
of
an
like
afterthought.
we're talking about the processes here, like the qualification process. The reason I like Oakwire and became an advisor, they do have like a checklist of things that SEs can ask their salespeople, and if they don't check all the boxes, you don't even have to get involved. Right? You can say like, "Hey, you didn't
Right.
check the boxes. Back off and go do something. Go get it."
That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
So,
Yeah.
anyways, if Sid's familiar, then I don't need to talk about it anymore. If anyone's interested, let me know. You can go to acquire.com and they have a free freemium, I guess, so you can start using it. But for me, when I talk about the proposals, I think the SE's job here, and this is a process, and that's before proposal process, before we jump on a call with a customer. Usually, the SE is not involved in the proposal, right?
Yeah. No.
Like our job is most likely to build the proposal. Maybe not the prices, but like, with the like why we're saying you need those features, like build the proposal defense.
And typically that's usually like, hey, I need you to do slides 1, 2, or 3 or whatever.
Yeah,
But but typically, I think someone else is owning the overall
yeah.
proposal.
Someone else is doing someone else will
Yeah.
jump on the call with the customer and do the proposal.
Yeah.
But the SEs have to actually figure out like why are we recommending these features, like this bill of material that we recommended.
Yeah.
And also our job here is to highlight the value.
Yep.
Like throughout our conversations, I always say this. I've said it a million times, and I'm going to say it again. Every time an SE opens their mouth, they're either adding value to a deal or removing value. You've heard me say it. You keep
Yeah.
smiling.
Yeah.
Uh, just, I think you're tired of hearing me say it. So throughout the process, we should be collecting information of like I've been in meetings where I've seen customers shake their head like, oh, this is useless. So I write down like hey, this feature did not stick. ROI is negative. Right. And some places I see them lean forward and like, oh, they're so happy, they're excited, they look at each other. and like they make signs and like, oh yeah, this is good, especially when you're one-on-one, when
Yeah,
you're
that's
like
cool.
in person. And now it's like, all right, this has a high ROI, and you're not always able to say like, oh, you'll get an ROI of 50% year over year, because it's not everything works like that, especially in my world where we sell hardware.
Mhm.
And you probably see more than that, more than me, Phil, when it comes to that thing. If you offer your services to a customer, they're probably, because of your service, direct result of your service, they're going to make more money, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So you can probably talk about a little bit more about ROI, but that's the SE's job here, to build the
Yep.
proposal, to help build the proposal, and to highlight the value, so that the salesperson can then go in front of the customer and say like, this is our price and this is why our price is fair.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, what will happen is a race to the bottom when it comes to prices, when it comes to discounts.
I think too, sometimes I find during the proposal process, lots of like wild cards kind of come up, and like the customer might ask this random, hey, can this use case also be handled? And then you're kind of scrambling to kind of figure out like, okay, you need to vet this one last idea like this late in the stage.
Yeah, well, the question then becomes, okay, well, that's again, everything is a process. The question is, why did it come up so late?
Yeah,
Right?
that's a
Is
good,
it,
yeah. I mean, something
did,
broke down earlier.
yeah, well, something broke down earlier, or it wasn't that important, and now they're adding it because, oh, we have all these things, might as well try to fix that. And if that's the
Yeah.
case, how can you like say it's not, but we solved, like, up till now we were solving 100, you just added this one. Now we're solving 90% of your problems. Is that still good enough?
Yeah. Like, is it worth like stalling the deal for
Yeah.
this?
And we can talk about it later, but like, we've been working with you for like 6 months now.
Yeah.
We're not going to restart. AKA value engineering. Yes, sir.
I like that.
A lot, like, there's a lot of terminologies that have been added recently that people have been doing for years.
They're just putting a label on it.
And now it has a name,
Yeah.
and it's easier to actually explain. Like, hey, if I go talk to, if I'm doing an interview, it's like, oh yeah, I know value engineering. I've been doing it for years. Like, I haven't taken a course or anything, but I know value engineering. So yeah. All right. The negotiation takes place with the account manager. SEs are not involved other than building the proposal and doing that. And the process that I see here is when the customer asks for discounts
Hmm.
because of certain mishaps or shortcomings or whatever, the SE in the proposal, in the process, should have talked to the account manager and said, this is what they're going to, like, these are the objections they're going to have to why they should pay, and this is how you overcome it. You're not going to capture everything, but you should be capturing a lot, because you
Yeah.
probably heard the same objections throughout the sales cycle.
Yeah, that's good information to pass down to the implementation team too, so they can be, if there's some like sore areas or kind of
Yeah,
sensitive topics. Yeah.
yeah. And the implementations also might have ideas of how to fix stuff,
Yeah.
right? Because they actually work on it. Like, I think of sales engineers are the doctors. Let's say they're kidney doctors. The implementations team is the team who actually built the dialysis machine. Right? So if
Cool.
someone
Yeah.
needs a feature, the implementations team may know how to get it there. So, and they're a great resource. So I always suggest you use them. Now, we talked a little bit about the handoff between here, and like the SE needs
Mhm.
to document stuff. What is the process? So I'm going to keep it as part of here, but as part of the scoping process, there should be a handoff process on its own. Actually, let's just add it here just for clarity's sake, but I'm not going to
Yeah. I
talk
think
about
that's
it
a
too much.
pretty important stage for
Yeah,
SEs. Yeah.
yeah, and you're handing off with who? Who are you handing off to? I mean, the implementations team, sure, it could be customer success.
Yeah. Typically customer success, or it might be like a technical account manager, a
Yeah,
TAM.
TAM, which is equal to technical. Thank you. Scott, here I was given a compliment, and I'm never too shy to share a compliment. I love the LOL in the end. Technical account manager could be like we talked about the implementation. It could be professional services.
Yeah, like a delivery manager.
Yep, a product. There's also project managers.
Hmm.
If you work for VMware, for example, or at Nokia or Alcatel-Lucent. I never worked at Nokia. I worked at Alcatel-Lucent, which is now part of Nokia. We had project managers to like handle the actual work that needs to be done. So actually, that's an interesting example. I used to work in network design, so someone else would get the lead, do the qualification, do the discovery, do the demo, do the pre-OV proposals, sell, and now they call in the support, the network design engineer, and that was me.
Hmm.
And I would show up and have no idea what was happening because I'm not given any information
Context, yeah.
here. And I have to either hunt down the sales team who have now moved on to the next deal. Hunt down. There's a separate team, by the way, for the POC POV at like larger organizations like
Yeah,
Nokia,
I've
these
seen
kinds
that
of
before
companies.
too.
Right? They have POV engineers.
Yeah.
That's all. That's their job. Um, Hunt them down to see like what did you demo to this customer, and then have to redo the discovery process all over again. We called it workshop, but it was a discovery process.
And that's probably frustrating for the client too, because they feel like they've already told that story.
I think they're used to it.
Yeah.
Like they've been in the like customers are they've been in the industry for a while. They worked with multiple vendors. They know that someone's going to come back and ask a million questions, and hopefully the sales team kind of sets them up for that. So,
I
project.
think the one thing that's tricky with number 10 is it's hard to define when the handoff is done and when the SC can kind of move on to the next thing, right? Because there is a little bit of overlap where, like, the SC, every SC I've met has always wanted to make sure this project that they
Yeah,
just sold goes well, so there's always a risk of kind of staying a little too long or not long enough.
that's another process to discuss. For me, I think the sales team who sold the product should stick with the customer until forever. Personally, why? That there's a lot of salespeople, not a lot. There are some salespeople out there who are just in it to make the quick buck, right?
Yeah.
And they're willing to lie, cheat, and steal to sell their stuff. And sometimes they don't get the sales engineer involved, and then they kind of just sell something, and then the SE shows up and like, what in the world just happened, right?
Yeah.
And then so like I wish that sales teams are involved throughout at least the first year, and then customer success can take over, and there should be like a few months overlap.
That's interesting. Like, I think it's a great idea. I don't ever see that happen in practice. I mean, like, incentives for sales teams don't ever line up like that. They're not incentivized to.
In my world, so when you talk in enterprise
Mm,
organizations, you might have a customer success team, but the sales team is always involved.
mm,
It's only like the smaller customers that have transactional deals where it's just sales teams are just churning. They're trying to
yeah.
get through it and move on to the next one because they have like 10,000 calls a day. So if you're, by the way, if you're selling into a small, medium sized business, you won't be able to do a lot of this, which kind of
Yeah.
sucks. And
But
again, go ahead.
it also too depends on the product you're selling too, because, like, if your implementation has a lot of upsells where they might start with a small subset and then later on after they go live, NSC can kind of go revisit and kind of sell them on the other stuff. So
That's why I think the sales team should always be involved. The sales
yeah.
team should be involved for at least the full year. The main reason I say that is once customer success takes over, they're on hook for the renewal,
Yeah.
right? But if the sales team didn't sell the product right, and it's part of the customer success team's quota to close this deal, but the customer will not renew, right? They just they just set up the customer success team for failure.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why I think, and again, you can talk to other people; they might have different opinions, and they're wrong. Just, sorry, yeah. So there's that, and yeah. For the people on the call here, what are your thoughts? I'd love to hear your thoughts and share them with everybody. So please let me know what your thoughts are. And because we're almost at the end, and the last thing I want to talk about is the post-sales process. So I'll start there, and if you have any comments, I'll come back to it. No, I don't want to shape. So number 11. So these are 11 back-end processes. Post-sales. What are your thoughts, Phil?
So typically, some post-sales things, because I also have the luxury of kind of being on the implementation post-sales team, so very, very familiar with this. Like a lot of times, there's a lot of nurturing, like maybe 2 weeks after they launch, it's kind of a check-in, and you kind of show them maybe some metrics of like, hey, like since you've been on the platform, this is how much you've improved. Like, let's talk about it. Or it could be how much they haven't improved, and it's a little more challenging conversation. And then that's typically kind of the first thing. And then SE is probably going to be involved in that more so in the fact of like, there might be conversations of, hey, like you were promised me this, and kind of historically kind of back some of those statements.
I like that. So, and the thing about post sales, there's like the front end part and the back end, and it's hard to divide. I love what you said, like, hey, the check-in time after 2 weeks. I think there should be a process in place in general of what happens after the implementation is done and we get sign off.
Yeah.
Right. Mainly because we promised the customer something, right? And we just did the implementation. We want to know how that went, how we can improve it.
Yep. Feedback.
And then after that, we told the customer they're going to get this ROI back. They'll be able to do this with this product. This is what you're going to have once it's said and done. And I'm happy you're trying to make sense of this, Scott. If you have any questions, drop them in the comments. We'll answer them. So we need to actually have, like, before we even close, like part of the negotiation process, I believe, we should be having like, this is the schedule after the call from the implementation side. And then after, when we're done implementation, we're going to meet the first week. Then we're going to meet after a month. Then we're going to meet after 3 months and do a quarterly review.
Yep.
Most people don't do that.
Yeah. That usually, especially in kind of early startups, everyone's so focused on kind of the earlier parts. I don't really see that happening until like things start to mature a bit.
Which is fine. You might not be able to do everything as part of a startup, but as a big company, you should be able to do this.
Yeah, 100%.
And as a startup, like maybe you won't do the meeting after the first week, and then after 3 weeks, and then after 3 months, but maybe you can do it after 1 month, right? Then 3 months after that. So you can scale this up and down.
Yeah.
And you should have to do that, because if you're a startup, you're expecting the customer renews after a year or 3 or whatever the contract is. And if they don't, it could really affect your bottom line, like, because you're going to go to your venture capitalist and tell them like, hey, you said if we make this amount of money in 2 years, you're going to fund us by this much,
right?
And then you don't, because you lost the customer because you didn't check in on them for an entire year. And that the worst feeling I get is I don't hear from a salesperson until like 5 minutes before it's renewal time. It's like, where have you been?
Right.
or lady.
You're not my friend.
Yeah, like, oh, now you show up. You want to have lunch, right? So there's the customer meeting follow-ups, but also on the other hand, what happens? What happens when customer needs support? Who's the point of contact? Again, it could be customer success. In my world, it's sales engineers.
Interesting.
It could be they could email my customers can email the support team directly, but because my customers are major customers like enterprise or larger, I want to know when you open a ticket, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, so I know how to push my support engineers. I've developed relationships with them so that when you need help, I can ask them like, hey, you know that other customer you're working with? Can you just delay them for 20 minutes so you can jump on a call with my customer?
Yeah. I noticed at kind of the larger companies, as an SC, I got really close with the support engineers
Yeah.
because they often would hit up the sales engineer first before a product engineer.
Yeah.
And that's where, as a sales engineer, you kind of flex a lot of your product muscle too, which is cool.
Yeah, and it depends. So here we can talk about these processes forever. But I got this. One of my managers in the past said, just because someone asks you to do something doesn't mean you have to do it.
100%.
It means you just have to get it done. Right. So
Yep.
if someone requests that you jump on like if they want to open a ticket, doesn't mean that you have to go in and log in and debug for half hour or an hour or two, especially if you're busy and need to get on a pre-sales call. But it will be your job to manage and make sure that someone from support jumped on the call with the customer and help them resolve the issue, or you're tracking the issue and you're following up on it and you're not forgetting about it. Scott says, it sounds like sometimes the AE or sales team does not always involve the SEs in the proper stage of a sales cycle. It will be harder to do the team justice if you are brought in later. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's the fault of the AE so much. It's in general, everyone's business is a little different. Like sometimes you might need more discovery by an SC and they'll need to be brought in earlier. You know, I don't know. That's a hard thing to kind of answer.
Yes. Well, for me, it's a management thing. It's not necessarily the account manager's problem, but it's a process problem, and that's where like we'll talk about that. I'll talk about that maybe next week.
Cool.
You're more than welcome to join me, Phil. But when you're doing this, the process should be obvious to the account manager of when the SE should be involved. Right? We talked about this here in the where in the SE involvement. Right. Right here. When should the SE be involved? Some organizations who are very transactional, the SE will only be involved in the demo, and they'll just do demo after demo after demo after demo, and that's the extent of their involvement. And if I were in that role, I would quit.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's a great role for someone just starting out and trying to build their demo muscle. On the other hand, it's also the SE's responsibility to sell their services to their account manager. I had one SE client who came to me and he kept saying like, "Hey, my salesperson only invites me to demos, and I'm not given any information ahead of time."
That's very typical.
Yeah, and we worked through it, and we kind of had a script where my client basically said to his account manager, "Okay, are we in the business of doing demos or closing deals? Because if we're in the business of doing demos, I'm happy to keep doing what you're asking me to do. But if you want my help to close deals, I need to be involved in a discovery, so I know what to demo. Because for this demo, I could have done this, and that differently." And maybe we would have closed the deal, maybe not, but at least we'd be closer to closing the deal, or at least we can qualify them out faster as well. And that changed the way that account manager. Well, he was working with a good account manager who took feedback, so he was able to get the manager to work with him a little bit more. So, yeah, I mean, it's we're in sales.
Yeah.
We have to sometimes sell the salesperson on the best processes.
The, I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. I love those points. The other side to that though is, the AE should also be responsible for a certain level of discovery as well, right? Like, and I feel like sometimes they'll lean on the SC too much, and then then you're kind of running the show for most part of that sales cycle, right? And so
Yeah, I don't mind that. I mean, okay, I mind something. I've been in demos where the salesperson is sitting right next to me or in the front of the room, and they're just replying to emails.
oh god,
Right? So what do? I tell them ahead of time, like, hey man, do you mind if you take notes while I'm doing the demo? I won't be able to take down notes because I'm going to be in this thing. Can you help me out with that? I give them a job.
yeah.
And it's like it's different from situation to situation, but we can figure that out. Let's just keep it like this.
I think my pet peeve is when the AE just turns off their camera.
Well, for me, I was in person.
Oh right, yeah.
Right? But like, even if we're off camera, I tell them like, hey, please take notes. Don't jump in like halfway through the demo. It's like, hey, how's it going? And then just disappear.
Yeah.
I give them a job, which helps quite a bit. And you kind of need to develop those relationships with your account managers to be able to actually do the job right.
100%.
Same way you develop relationships with the customers, with support, you need to earn that salesperson's trust so that when you say like, hey, I need you to do this for me, they know I'm not just giving them work. Like, there's something behind it. So.
I think it's also too kind of a healthy, not healthy tension, but it's a healthy conversation to be like, hey, like, when you pulled me in here, like it would have been helpful if you would have dug into this in your discovery, and kind of you're coaching the AE to kind of learn more types of questions to add to his playbook.
Or you can ask.
Yeah.
There's nothing stopping you from asking questions. I've witnessed people doing discovery, like sales teams and sales and person in SE. And it's like the salesperson talks for 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. They're done with their questions. And then they turn to their SEs like, do you have any questions? And then the SE jumps in with their like, hey, how many users, whatever, all that stuff. But it should be a conversation. If you're three friends sitting in the room, is it just one friend doing all the asking?
Right.
And then you jump in? No, you're having a conversation. You're piggybacking on what the salesperson said. You're piggybacking on what the customer said. Right? The customer is asking questions. You're answering them. It can't be an interrogation. It has to be a conversation.
Yeah, I love that.
The customer has to enjoy it. If you can make the customer enjoy the conversation with you, make jokes, laugh at their jokes, be a human, basically. Don't be there to just like pull out information. Be a human. You'll have more conversations with the customers. I've built relationships within like 2-3 meetings just by like, hey, how you doing? All right, like just having a conversation. Be human. We're in a human business. So
is a lot of your sales interactions still in person even today?
Not a lot, but I make a point of doing it as much in person as possible.
That's cool.
It has a higher value for me. Right? Like I can, if I meet a customer in person, they just share information.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Water cooler talk. So I like it. But yeah. That's any other thoughts before we hang up? I know you want to have dinner. I'm in my PJs already.
No, this is fun. This is fun. I'm down to do this again. I think I know you're going to talk about front end stuff, and I think another thing that would be a cool topic maybe later on is, another aspect of. I think you mentioned trade shows and web and stuff like that. Like, manning a booth is also got a very interesting experience for SEs. So
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I love this. Some customers are sophisticated and can sniff out commission breath. And here's the thing about customers in general: they assume there's commission breath whenever they're talking to a salesperson. Like, have you ever talked to a salesperson and thought like, this person's here to help me? If you ever go to a car dealer, do you ever think like,
oh,
oh,
especially car dealers.
this
Yeah,
guy
yeah.
or girl are here to answer all my questions? Like, and then they ask, hey, what can we do today to get you in this car? So, yeah. All right. That's it
Cool.
for today. Facts. That's right. Facts. I like it. Thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you, Phil, for jumping on.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. This was fun.
It's my pleasure. Open invite. I'm going to try to do this every Tuesday and every Thursday.
Cool.
And if you want to stay up to date with what we're doing, this is not to Phil, this is to anybody listening. Check out WeTheSalesEngineers.com. You can put in your email address and you'll stay up to date on these things. And if you want to talk about the SE hotline, I'm happy to talk about that as well. So that's it. I'm going to sleep, man. See you.
All right. Good night, man.